Hi, my name is James. Welcome to King's Fine Woodworking. Today I am going to show you how to do the unboxing and assembly of our new compact size flagship table saw sled, and it fits each and every one of these table saws. In fact, it fits probably dozens more than that. I haven't found a saw yet that it doesn't fit, and we personally went out and bought the 10 most popular ones just to make sure that it fit them all and to fine-tune it so that it was perfect for virtually any compact or job site type sled, and of course it works just as good on any full-size sled. In fact, half the people that are buying it have full-size saws. They just like the lighter, smaller, easier to handle sled. You will receive your sled in a box like this, and you'll find when you open it that it is packed with recycled shredded cardboard. It's clean cardboard, and it's great for composting if you do that sort of thing. It can go in the trash as well, no problem, because it's all biodegradable. And it's a good use of material that's out there that's been recycled to save a little bit on the environment. And you just want to be careful because you don't want to open this like in your living room and get this all over your house, but if you open it in your shop, you can pull all of the individual pieces out of it. And then make sure you sift through the cardboard carefully. Sometimes people miss a piece or two down in there. And then lay it all out, and it will look something like this. These are all the components. The base here does not have the T-track installed, but yours will. So there's one less step that you actually have to do. And you will also need to download your plans. When you buy the sled, there's a link for you to download these, and if you forget that, we email you a link. And you see I've identified each individual component in blue as we go through, and I have named them and given them a number so that you can easily check the size of each of these components should you decide to build a duplicate of this sled. But in this case, you'll kind of know what each piece is, you'll know where they go, and that will assist you should you need it for putting things together. First thing you'll do is just put glue on the two upper outer boards and the two upper inner boards. Then you'll place the wide board, which is the upper outer board, on the outside of the T-track, and the narrow board on the inside of the T-track. On your sled, the T-track will already be permanently mounted, so that makes this practically foolproof. The wide board only goes there, it fits perfectly on the outside, and the narrow board goes right on the inside, touching the T-track. This is the safety box that goes in the back, and that's basically what it looks like. We used to use acrylic for the top of these so you could see through, but that really never worked. The acrylic, it's plastic, holds static electricity, and that really, the first time you make a cut, it's just clogged with sawdust and you can't see it. And then sometimes that acrylic will take a bump or a knock if you set the sled down hard, and it'll pop off. Glue just doesn't bond great between acrylic and wood, so we switched this to a wooden top. Whole thing's made to 3/8 inch ply. I like to put glue, and then here again also some pin nails. Pin nails will basically hold it in place nicely until the glue dries. But because of the design, the way it's all held up here, it's locked in pretty tight. It really becomes a very solid box. Once everything is pin nailed and glued, we'll set that aside to dry as well. And that's just a safety block that we're going to put on the back. And then we're going to go ahead and mount the front fence to the front of the sled. The front part is the part where the T-track comes all the way to the end, because the T-track is going to hold that front fence in regular operation. And once we have that secured down, we're going to flip this thing upside down, and we are going to screw the front fence into the sled. This is critically important to do that. You have to screw it in very snugly. I'm going to show you that here in a second. And that's what's going to give this thing stability when we're going through all of the adjustments that we need. This is a temporary operation, and it's just needed to hold the sled securely together while we are doing the back fence. We'll take these screws out later, but you have to have this secured in very tight now, or you'll have major problems building the sled. You put 6 or 8 of these in. They need to have pilot holes put in, and 2.5 inch deck screws is what I've used, all the way across, and you want to sink them in tight. You don't want this fence, the front fence, to move. You want it to be permanently bonded right there until we decide to remove it later. Let's turn our attention to the miter bars. We'll start preparing those. We're going to put some set screws in on the side, and basically just get a Allen wrench and drive these guys all the way in. You have to drive them all the way in so that they're buried, and then coming out maybe flush to the other side, and you'll kind of adjust them, do some micro adjusting until you have a nice snug fit between there and your slot. You don't want any wiggle in your miter bar, but it also has to be able to slide really smoothly forward and backwards. We'll do that with both of these guys. And then it's important to, when you set these in here, we want the screws going that way on this side and the other way on the other side. And that's because once this is bonded to the sled, the set screws no longer matter. This sled will basically hold your T-track, or I'm sorry, your miter bars all the way against one edge of the slots, and they'll stay fitting that way forever. You're not relying on the set screws anymore after that. So we're going to set a little bit of something underneath them, like a penny or a washer, to elevate these things up so they're slightly above the surface of the table saw. That way when we apply a little bit of glue, it's going to be able to stick that to the top of the sled. I want this roughly in the center of the sled, so I'm going to measure back about 1 inch, and I'll do the same on both sides. Measure back about 1 inch. Then we want to ensure we have the fence set exactly at 11 7/8 inches. 11 7/8, that's important. That's what's going to align the whole sled with the dead center of your blade. Then you're going to take some CA glue. Then you're going to want to put a little bit of CA glue, just a few drops on each of these miter bars. These are just enough to hold the miter bar onto the sled so that we can pick it up and put the screws in. If you put very little, it's easy to take these off in the future. If you put a ton, it's very hard. Now get your sled flush against that fence. That's why that distance mattered on your fence. And then keep it aligned to the front of your table saw, and then push it down. We'll put some weight on it for a little bit, let it sit. You can even spray a little bit of the instant cure to that adhesive. It's the accelerator for the CA glue. Make it bond right away. Or you can wait, 5 minutes and then pick it up. And that's it. We were able to pick them up successfully. That's all that mattered. Now we can screw them in. Here also, we're not going to put any pilot holes. We're just going to drill these or screw these right in. Same thing. These will also strip really easily. So if you don't have good control with your screw gun, just put them in with a screwdriver. And there we go. That's all in. They're in tight and snug. Now I want to go ahead and prep the bottom of the sled. I want to sand the bottom of the sled, make it nice and smooth everywhere. And this is like 150 grit paper, so it's just a little bit coarse because I want some pores open in this. I got all the dust off of it because I want this paste wax to get inside of and kind of impregnate the wood. But I've sanded the whole bottom surface. I've thoroughly coated it with paste wax. I let the paste wax dry a little bit till it was hazy and dry, and then I buffed it off. Once you do that, you're going to get a sled that slides very nicely. I could probably just push it right off the edge of the saw like I almost did. That's critical. And it'll stay sliding nicely as long as you have that front fence secured down. All right, remember, this gets lined up with your zero clearance stuff, not centered on the sled. And that chamfer has to go down into the front, just like that. And the left side of the fence is 1 1/8 of an inch away from the left side of the sled. Now we're going to clamp that down so that we can screw it in from the bottom. Yep, check again to make sure these are lined up good. And then we'll put some pilot holes here as well, because we don't want anything splitting. And we're just going to put 2 screws, one at the far right and one at the far left, in case we have to adjust the fence. 9 times out of 10, we've got to adjust the fence because it's not perfect. So we'll screw this in very snugly. And we're going to do the same on the opposite side, about 1 inch from the edge. We want to spread as good of a spread as we can to get the most accurate layout later, in case we decide to do like the 5-cut method to square it, which I'm not going to do on this one. But I will show you how. I've got videos on it, so we'll teach you how to do that in case you want to do that. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and put these in. the zero clearance inserts, and you can kind of see how these work. Zero clearance inserts are really important because it allows you to change to different blade sizes and slide the zero clearance inserts back up to touching the blade on each side. That way you have no areas where your material can rip out on the bottom. And if you change to a dado blade, you move these out of the way and put them up snug to the dado blade. If you change to a thin kerf blade, you move them up to the thin kerf blade. That way you haven't ruined your sled every time you switch blades. You always have a nice, perfect zero clearance fit. Zero clearance inserts on sleds are a fantastic idea. And we'll put the back ones in as well. You see they don't come all the way to the top. So that's how those work. Now, one important thing is you want to check this back fence. Very often, the back fence will warp a little bit. That's totally normal. It's very rare to see one that's perfectly flat, even if you took the time and precaution to glue it up flat. No big deal. You just take a straight edge like a level, like a box beam level, and clamp it tightly to the fence. And then all the rest of the operations until your zero clearance method and your fence is fully secured, you'll leave this on. That way when you're done fully securing it, you want to make sure that that's tight all the way across. Once you're done fully securing the fence, you can pull these off and your fence will now stay straight forever. So don't screw your fence on until you've checked this. And if your fence is not flat and straight, clamp a straight edge to it before you continue. That's important. Mine just so happened to be straight. A lot of times it's not. All right, so we're going to just put this on, and this is just going to go on with CA glue, nothing special. You may want to knock this off in the future, but usually we don't ever have to. We don't ever have to access anything here. I'll spray a little bit of the accelerator onto that, and I want this to be flush with the top and roughly centered around those bolts. It's not going to fully cover them, but that's okay. It's not really intended to. This is just something so that when the blade passes through the fence, it disappears kind of down into this box, and I don't, put my hand right down where the blade might be. Once I fully cut through the wood, the blade will be in the box, and my hand won't be there, so it'll be, safe to operate. It's just a safety feature. I know some people don't have them, but I highly recommend it. And then we're going to go ahead and take our first cut through the sled. If you did not secure that front fence fully down and you make this cut, your sled will no longer slide. You've made a big mistake and your sled will no longer slide. The front fence has to be secure. Okay, so real quick, I am going to square this fence, or check square first here, with just a square. I'm checking it with the blade. I'm checking a tooth of the blade that points to the left there, and a tooth of the blade that points to the left in the back. And it turns out, even when I zoom up really close, that this just so happens to be perfect. The back, of course, is nice and tight. That's important. And we'll check an up close here, and it's spot on. If for any reason it wasn't, I can unscrew the screw on the left side of the back fence and move the back fence forward or backward a little bit to get this perfect. Now, 99% of the time, this is all the accuracy you will ever need. It's very rare you need accuracy to the thousandth of an inch, but if you decide you want that, use the 5-cut method. I have that in a separate video. I'm going to put a link to it. The 5-cut method will get you accurate to a thousandth of an inch, or maybe a couple thousandths of an inch. Way overkill for woodworking, and I'm going to show you that here by making some test cuts as well. All right, so I've got this squared according to that square and nothing else, and I'm going to check it. Just a simple crosscut. I didn't raise the blade quite high enough there. And the square that I'm going to use to check this is actually a Kynex square. That square itself is a machinist square, stainless steel, and it is accurate to the thousandth of an inch. And take a look at this guy up close. Look at my cut. My cut is perfect. If I zoom in, it's perfect. There is no problem. You simply don't need a cut more accurate than that. It's very rare that you need to make cuts that are accurate to a thousandth of an inch. So if you're satisfied with that cut, then secure the back fence. Remember, you might even still have your straight edge clamp there, so you won't have put your safety block on either. But secure the back fence all the way across. 6 or 7 more screws, 2.5-inch screws. Pre-drill them, put pilot holes in. and then secure them down very tightly. Now the sled will hold itself together and you can take the screws out of the front, but not before. If you do it before, your sled will rack and it won't slide in the tracks. Let's test it. Of course, get the junk out of the way. Yep, still slides really well. Very good. So only after all that would you be able to take the straight edge off the back if you need to, and you can take these screws out of the front. They're no longer necessary. The whole sled is being held together now by the back fence. It wouldn't hold together if the back fence had just 2 screws, but once it's fully screwed, it'll hold together. And that's it, and we're still sliding smoothly. Now you can do a lot of operations without the front fence, like cutting much, much larger pieces than you ordinarily would be able to. So now we'll take a moment and we'll adjust the zero clearance inserts to get them up next to the blade. I slid them up to the blade, right to the teeth. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put this picture frame triangle on and we're going to give it a try. So it fits onto the sled and slides all the way back to the fence on the sled. And the holes allow you to use some bolts and attach it with star knobs. And this is a stop block that makes the whole thing work. The stop block, according to the plans, has a dado depth of 5/16 of an inch. So if I push the ruler all the way into the stop block and then I slide the stop block up to the picture frame triangle, that gives the exact distance that the ruler is away from the edge of the triangle. Then I'm going to slide that forward, making sure the stop block stays in contact with the picture frame triangle and making sure the ruler is buried all the way in the dado. And I'm going to bring the corner of the ruler right up to the blade. I want a right facing tooth to be right at the very peak of the ruler, because we're going to cut the ruler off right here. This basically is the 0 mark. If we're making a measurement for a picture frame, we want the 0 mark to be right at the right edge of that blade. And we'll install some screws. I don't want to sink them fully because I don't want to strip anything out, because I don't want to make another picture frame triangle. So I'm just going to sink them in about 3/4 of the way, and then I'm going to finish those up with a screwdriver. Here again, I'm making sure that the ruler is buried in the dado fully, the whole 5/16, and I'm making sure that that stop block is pushed against the picture frame triangle. That gives us the exact offset distance that ruler is. That ruler sticks out off of the right side of the triangle by exactly 5/16, and using the stop block as a gauge, that helps me get that distance away from the edge of the triangle and makes everything work perfectly. And here I am securing down those screws a little bit better. And I'm going to have to deactivate the brake on the Sawstop because I'm going to cut metal. Now once I've done that, I'm going to just chop that off. Just go nice and slow. Aluminum cuts very much like wood. It doesn't harm the blade at all. And that's cut off at 45 degrees. We don't need that cut off piece because you're not going to make a teeny tiny little picture frame that's only 1 inch long. Your picture frame is obviously much bigger. This just gives us a measurement from the blade back to what size you want this thing. Now, since I have a Sawstop and I don't want to necessarily have that blade come into contact, even slight contact with that metal while I'm cutting, so I'll take the ruler off, take it over to my chop saw, and cut another 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch off of the edge of the ruler. That way, once I resecure the ruler, I'm going to file it so it's not so sharp. Yeah, sometimes when you cut it, it's got sharp, jagged edges, and we don't want to get cut on it, so any file works nicely for that. But this way, when I'm making cuts in the future, that edge of the ruler is well away from the blade, and there's no way that it's going to cause a problem. So I want to put these things back in by hand, the screws back in by hand. I want to make sure I don't strip, and they're going to go track right back in the same holes. Everything's going to line up exactly the same. My ruler's going to be offset like it's supposed to off of the triangle, and you see I have a gap between there and the blade, so the blade will never come in contact with the ruler when I'm making a picture frame. And we don't need that material that was lost because picture frames are always bigger. Okay, so now I need to attach a clamp to the stop block. That's going to clamp the stop block to the ruler so that we can measure our wood. So when we're cutting a frame, we'll use the stop block for the frame, and that'll give us, frame pieces that are the exact same size. We set the stop block once, cut, both pieces of frame, either both the left and right side or both the top and bottom, because those two have to be matching pairs. And there, it locks in everywhere. Alright, so that's the picture frame triangle. It's done. Let's jump to the last jig or component that will go on this sled, and that is this miter function board. This will turn this sled into effectively a miter saw with the ability to cut angles, any angles that you want. So I'm just going to chop the corner of this off. It lets me get the digital angle finder right up to the edge, and I've marked the layout for the holes. We're going to drill those, and we'll put our bolt in. That holds it. You bring this thing back to the sled fence like you did the other jig, the picture frame jig. Secure that. That's how that rides in there. And we want to make sure that this clears the blade on the right hand side. If this doesn't clear the blade, then you can't glue down the digital angle finder, because you cut it off. So if it doesn't clear the blade, chop it off. And you'll notice that if I was to tilt the blade now, it's going to cut that in half. So that's why we have to have a second hole about 1.25 inches away there. That's laid out in the plans for you. And you would use the second hole if you're going to make a compound miter cut, because this particular sled can make compound cuts. You can turn your blade at a bevel, a 45-degree bevel, and at a 45-degree miter using this. So you can make some pretty amazing cuts with this sled. Alright, so we got the two holes set, and now we're going to glue on this digital angle finder. We want it flush to both edges. That's why I've got those other little blocks there, kind of giving me measurements to get flush to the edges. And I'll put some CA glue, not too much. That's probably a little too much, no big deal, but it glues this really well. This ABS material glues really well to the wood. So does steel. They all glue really well to wood. And those are kind of, I'm using those boards kind of to give me a guide. And then I'll spray a little bit of activator on there to give us an instant cure. And next I'm going to attach this. It's called a miter blade, what I'm calling it. And we'll attach this one as well. Now this one, we don't want to slide it this way and attach it, because you're going to block that battery cover. So we'll just slide it up to this point and attach it. And those things are basically giving us the bearing surface for the wood we're going to be cutting a miter on. You'll see how that works in a moment, because we're going to use it. And we're going to put that in. We're going to make sure that stays exactly flush with the blade. We'll check it here, holding everything up flush tight. It's important to do that because that's kind of part of your accuracy of the whole system. A little bit of spray, and we're going to glue this to the front, and this is going to be the bearing surface for the wood that you're going to cut. We'll put some CA glue here, and this thing's under no real pressure. It's just kind of a backstop for the whole thing, even though this glue is actually pretty strong. You don't have to worry about it being not strong enough or too weak. And we'll line that up there, hold that in snug, and give that a little bit of glue. A little bit of accelerator, I mean. And that's how that works. So we just can dial it whatever angle that we want to cut. Turn it on. It's at 0. You can tear it, reset it at 0. Once it comes all the way back to the back, it stays at 0. And move this up to whatever angle you want. There's 45.15 degrees, accurate to the 100th of a degree. And that's 0.00 degrees, as it should be. Now let's put this in place and see how it works. Once again, a washer and a star knob holds this in place. Make sure that the jig is back flush tight against your fence, and tighten it down. Alright, so we'll loosen the lock knob on it, bring that up. That's how that works. And we'll do a test cut here at let's say 45 degrees. We'll see how that works. It's pretty accurate, so it takes a second to get it exactly 45, and then we're going to go ahead and lock down the lock knob. Now obviously the lock knob is not the strongest thing on earth, so you're not going to want to go knocking against that wood. Just kind of set it in place and hold it still. And then you see it sticks off the end of the sled, which is nice to have a removable front fence. And we'll lay our wood down there and we'll give it a cut. And we'll go take a measurement and see just how accurate that miter cut is. Nice thing here is you don't just have to do 45. You can do any angle you want. But let's check 45 and see what that looks like. Checking it with a good quality square hair, combination square, and it's spot on. Get a little bit closer, I think, so you can see it. I'm holding this still. My wife's holding it, and I'm trying to film it to give you an indication. But that digital angle finder is extremely accurate. 100th of a degree is a little bit overkill, but you know, whatever. It's nice to have. If you get the sled from us, it comes with that, of course. Everything comes with it. Picture frame gauge and or picture frame jig and the miter jig as well. This is a piece of picture frame molding that I have cut. It's got the picture frame dado cut out of it, and the top is sloped in. It's kind of a little walnut picture frame we made some of. And I'm going to show you how it works. So we'll set this up here. And it can be really long. It can come off the back end of your sled by 6 feet if it need be. You know, you start with the long pieces of molding. You cut one edge at your 45, and then you bring it to the other side, and then you're going to adjust your stop to whatever length that you want. That's why the ruler's there for measurements. Let's say we want this at 5.5 inches. We'll bring the stop up to that point, and then we'll take a cut. You can hold it down. You can use the clamp and hold it down. And there's one piece of the picture frame. If I were to make, I'd make two identical ones, one for the top, one for the bottom, or however that goes. And then we'll prep for the next piece for the top. I'm just making a couple of small pieces because I want to test it and see how accurate or how nice this picture frame comes out. You can cut pretty small pieces on this. And we'll cut that off. Probably should have started with a longer chunk of frame, but that's all I had left, and I didn't want to make any more picture frame molding. Let me get the and my blade is so dirty. It's kind of fraying the top end of this wood. All right, so there's that, and we'll take a look at it. We'll measure it with the against the gauge here. We got that tight, and we'll take a look up close. So I get it to focus. Sorry, it's hard to focus this camera up close. And there's that. It's perfect. This is a perfect picture frame, and this is done with a speed square and real simple squaring. And so this is what I'm trying to illustrate. You just don't have to have the 5-cut method necessarily. You don't have to get anything down to the 1,000th of an inch to have perfect results. Even if I had a hairline gap in that wood where it met, glue would fill it, but there was no gap, so it works fine. When you're done, you just put your sled back or your front fence back on, and that's it. So let's take a look at another product we developed for the sled, and that is a stop block for the back. It's a flip stop, and the nice thing about this flip stop is that it has crosshairs on the side, both sides, and it comes with a 3/8 inch by 16 bolt in there. And the 3/8 by 16 means it's 16 threads per inch. So if we take this and we mark the top of it, or any one corner, doesn't really matter where, and then you can see the crosshairs on there. If I was to turn this in all the way by one full turn, that moves it in by 1/16 of an inch exactly. And if I turn it in halfway, that moves it in by a 32nd. And if I was turning it in a quarter of the way, that's a 64th of an inch. And we could even do fractions in between, like 128th of an inch. So it's a real accurate way to do a real precision adjustment. And so let's mount this onto the sled. We have to mount the T-track on the sled first. So what I like to do to get an exact position is I'll just go ahead and secure that to the T-track, and I'll set that up with a T-track in a spot such that this comes flush. See, that would be too big of a gap. And if we put the T-track too far back, well, this wouldn't fold flat. So just get it so that it folds flat, and that's your spot. That's probably common sense, I don't know, but I just thought I would mention it. And once you have that in the right spot, then we're just going to screw in the T-track. We've gone through a few different types of stops over the past year, trying to dial this in and you can get just the perfect tool for the job, and I end up having to make my own. But I really like this stop. I really like the function of a flip stop, and there are a lot of good stops out there that are just solid that don't flip, but I like to leave the stop on there and flip up out of the way when I'm not using it. It means a lot to me, because then I can keep an accurate spot marked, move it out of the way, cut something else, then put it back, and then recut the same thing I was cutting before. So that's it, and then this will slide back and forth on here to wherever you need it for your stop. You got the micro adjust function, and see, this comes all the way to the bottom of the sled, which most stop blocks don't. A lot of them stop, an inch before the bottom of the sled, like these. And it's okay for thicker wood, but if you're cutting a thin piece of wood, that's a problem. But this will cut thin pieces, no problem. And with the micro adjust function, you can slide that up, and of course you can flip the stop up out of the way when it's not in use. So I think it's kind of a handy tool. We're going to sell these separately too for anybody who might want some. This one's for a 4-inch fence with T-track on top. I think we're going to sell shorter ones too, like for a 3-inch fence. We might even sell them in a couple colors, I'm not sure, but we have these in stock available right now, and these actually come shipped on all of our new sleds. And what you see here is the complete package. Everything in this is included. But all this comes included with the sled package if you were to buy it from us. The picture frame jig, the miter jig, the stop block, all this stuff. So there it is, the full package. That's what it looks like. It's all done. Hope you enjoyed the project, and thanks for watching.